thank you very much for inviting me, organisers. I think I'm just picking up here where Sean left off. That was very nicely timetabled. Ready to lean further into that microphone. Thank you. Right, I'm going to talk to you about the Meshrep. I have to admit, I was looking over my paper last night and feeling slightly bored. Don't worry. This is a topic I've been thinking about off and on for quite a few years now. And I was thinking perhaps it's a little tired. But listening to the rest of the dialogue today, particularly, I think, the opening session this morning, when so much of the language was concerning safeguarding and heritage. So I think really that some of the issues concerning this, some of the contradictions really do need to be unpicked again and again. So I never get tired of attending Meshreps, by the way, so I want to start with just showing you a brief minute of some video. Right, so this was something that I shot very badly on a mini cam with super night vision on in 2000 in Meshrep, in Mekit. Do we have any sound? Do we have any sound? It's a shame not to have some sound. Okay, so since 2010, then this particular village Meshrep and its musical tradition of the Dolan Mukam has become an object of huge promotion. These village musicians, these individuals you see here, they now teach and perform, some of them with the Xinjiang Song and Dance Troupe. They feature in Uyghur pop videos, they're very frequently seen on Chinese media, and they've toured the world. How did all this come about? So the Uyghur Meshrep was inscribed in 2010 on the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. And this was one of many items which have been submitted by China and approved by UNESCO in recent years. Now let's be clear, this was primarily a Uyghur initiative. It was begun several years before 2010 and spearheaded by the retired regional president Timur Dawamet. So they took their application to the Chinese state, the state presented it to UNESCO, and in order for this submission to be accepted. They needed a lengthy document detailing why the Meshrep are important, why do they need safeguarding, and what the state is going to do to safeguard them. Part of the process of bringing things to UNESCO requires archiving and publication initiatives. And we saw through the 2000s a huge effort in this sphere. So a series of academic studies and notably a set of 31 films of regional Meshrep, which were released in 2008. Just a couple of stills from some of these films then. Really wonderful documents, these films, very lavish productions, very fascinating texts, which are works of bricolage, I like to call it, things chucked together, including many disparate items which are stitched together into a loose kind of Meshrep structure, designed to fit a nice 45-minute video. Some wonderful examples of local expressive culture included on these DVDs, and right up against some terrible examples of staged kitsch. So that is a story which has been told in some detail, but just a quick comment. I think the processes involved recall in many ways the processes of canonization, which also took place much earlier, involving the Uyghur 12 Mukam. These are acts which precede and enable projects of enshrining things that people do as national culture. And I always think a nice way to think about what's going on here is to compare the enshrining of the Meshrep as intangible cultural heritage, to compare it with the English night down the pub. And I think these are a very comparable, loose set of practices. You're all looking extremely blank. It's a very local kind of concept, the night down the pub. You're very welcome if you come to London to come experience it. Sean's with me. Good. So just to have a look at some of the language involved in the state submission. This is a very short excerpt from the document there. Right. So, what has been going on then since 2010? What has happened to Meshrep? How is this safeguarding going? So, since 2010, I argue we observe a number of trends. The first is, predictably, the transformation of Meshrep into song and dance, gung. Meshrep has now taken its place on the national stage. It's performed by the Xinjiang Song Dance Troupe and the Mukam Ensemble. The productions by these troupes, they use the Meshrep as fresh material for their long-established project, which is shared by many of these professional ethnic minority troupes within the People's Republic, and it continues their direct role of support for state propaganda campaigns. So this is just a very quick harvesting from Google. We can see a recent Meshrep performance in Uyghur, which is supporting the Harmonious Society, one of the recent state projects. A slightly older one. This is at the dance gala, the new version of the Dolan Meshrep being screened on national Chinese TV. It's worth a quick look at this, perhaps, because it is interesting. Is that all at all? Can you hear that, Jim?
Devlet propagandası, milletler arasındaki şimdi milletlerin birbiriyle güzel ittifak ve ilişki içinde yaşadığını gösterebilir.
Right, I'm going to cut that brutally short. Many of you have probably seen it already. It's very easily available on YouTube. So it would be easy on one level to dismiss this as yet another example of the well-rehearsed stereotype of Uyghur performers serving up spectacles for the Han audience, displaying their harmonious presence in a multi-ethnic nation. But I think on another level, this speaks to Uyghur national sentiment. The lyrics you can see there, written by the respected Uyghur poet Mentally Zunun, got that right? And performed by the ever wonderful granddaddy of Uyghur pop stars, Abdullah Abdurrahim. This performance, I think, expresses a nostalgic identification with Meshrep, one created by these Uyghur urbanites, a proud and emotional recreation of a heritage from which they are distant in time and space, but nonetheless they feel a very strong ownership of. So that's one trend then, song and dance, in support of state projects. The second trend is very clearly deployment of Meshrep as an international cultural asset, at work as part of Chinese soft diplomacy. So we saw the Xinjiang Song and Dance Troupe again, performing Dolan Meshrep in Turkey in March 2013. And we also see this same agenda pursued for profit in a convergence of neoliberal values and state interests by privately run groups such as the Xinjiang Dinar Arts Troupe. Commodification also converges with a sense of Uyghur national pride. In Xinjiang in 2012, we found these Meshrep household appliances. Don't know how well they work. And of course, it also serves tourism, so you can now find upmarket restaurants in Beijing and also in Turban, serving up Uyghur food and usually belly dancing floor shows. What else do we have? Oh yes, and also interestingly cross-ethnic buy-in. So this Keep Fit class organised by actually a Han Chinese teacher, the link, if you want to send it, is fabulous. So these kinds of transformations in designated items of heritage are now very familiar across China, from Kunchu opera to the Dongzu Dage, the big song of the Kam people in the southwest. Many examples. And in contemporary scholarship on intangible cultural heritage, there's now much greater acceptance of these kinds of development, evolution and change. Some scholars argue that insofar as it affords them greater resilience and adaptability, it's also better for these items of heritage that they are allowed to change. Can you hear the but coming? But. But this is not the way that the Meshrep was, if you like, sold to UNESCO. And this is also not the way that the value and meanings of Meshrep were acknowledged by UNESCO when it accepted the nomination. Term, local communities. In my report, which was commissioned by UNESCO in 2009 on the state submission, I raised some concerns about the current security situation in Xinjiang, in particular the restrictions on community gatherings, and I asked how grassroots preservation initiatives could possibly be implemented in this situation. So now 5 years on, is that right? Yes. 5 years on, what is going on inside these communities? So ever since the 1990s, when separatism and religious extremism were identified as threats to the region's stability, Meshrep gatherings have been directly targeted by local authorities in connection with these problems. The most well-known example is the Ili Meshrep movement of the 1990s, an attempt by social activists to counter youth alcoholism, drug abuse and crime. Local authorities were alarmed by its growing influence and in 1997 they detained its leaders. This sparked a protest which was met with police violence and a wave of arrests and executions. Many of you are very familiar with this piece of history, and obviously from Sean's writings. After this incident, the Meshrep were divided by the authorities into healthy Meshrep and unhealthy. The healthy were to be supported and the unhealthy suppressed. Now, how is that distinction made? I believe that the issue is not so much one of whether the Meshrep include any so-called religious extremism or separatist activities, but rather in the 1990s and still today about who is in charge. And at the heart of this is a question of the state's ability to tolerate free association and community-led initiatives in the Xinjiang region today. I preempted it in this slide. There we go. So after the past few years, we've seen numerous reports then from across Xinjiang of crackdowns, arrests, fines and imprisonment of people involved in illegal religious activities and illegal gatherings. In the summer of 2012, I went back to a village in southern Xinjiang that I've been visiting several times over the past decade. I've been to several Meshrep in that village, but in 2012, the Jihid Bishi, the Meshrep leader, said that they had not dared to organize a Meshrep since our previous visits 3 years before, because the local authorities wouldn't allow it. It is a shame, he said. Our young people are not learning how to play Meshrep anymore. They don't understand our values. They don't know how to behave. So on that occasion, emboldened by the presence of foreigners in the village, and also by a visit by a well-known musician from Urumqi, they decided to go ahead, these brave villagers, and hold a Meshrep. They rigged up the electric lights, they laid out the felt mats, they made polo for the important guests. Several hundred villagers arrived on foot, by donkey cart and motorbikes. The musicians played and the people danced. And about an hour later, a group of Uyghur policemen arrived and told the organisers to stop. At the same time, the guests who'd come from the county town received calls from their work units, telling them that the event was not officially approved and that they should leave. There was a tense standoff, and then one of the policemen turned out to be a relative of one of the organisers, and so a compromise was negotiated, and the party was allowed to continue until midnight, Xinjiang time. So this kind of cat and mouse game with the authorities is entirely representative of all my visits in rural Xinjiang. And this kind of heavy-handed policing of community events has been more and more in evidence since 2009. All too often, I would argue, it's this kind of thing that sparks off the violent incidents that are then presented in the media as organised terrorism. So, at the heart of this apparent paradox, then, this apparent paradox of promotion on the one hand and suppression on the other, I think lies different interpretations of the notion of community, a notion that is central to much of UNESCO's proclaimed goals. When UNESCO proclaims that Meshrep provide communities with a sense of identity and continuity, what does it mean by community? And I think very clearly that the widespread understanding and implementation of intangible cultural heritage situates community as a component of national identity, very much in the classic formulation from Benedict Anderson. So Meshrep is refigured as Uyghur national heritage. And insofar as this is the aim of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Project, then the Meshrep project has been very successful. It's a collaboration between Uyghur cultural leaders and the Chinese state, and it has considerable buy-in from Uyghur audiences. However, if we take an alternative view of community, one that emphasizes local identities and places, interaction and shared experiences, then this view of safeguarding heritage, to which UNESCO pays lip service, is clearly unsustainable under current security policies in Xinjiang. And it should be a matter of concern to UNESCO that one of its items designated for safeguarding is at the least severely impeded at grassroots level by state authorities.